as as a young boy, little James Leninger was mesmerized with airplanes. He he would take his family's furniture was all beat and worn. He'd take his airplanes and crash them, slam them head first into the furniture. Get him around an airplane, he'd walk around it like he was doing some kind of flight check. He particularly liked the Corsair, a World War II fighter plane. Said that they pulled to the left and that they had a problem with flat tires, which research showed that they did. When he was about 2 years old, he began to have nightmares, and 2 or 3 a week. And he would say, scream out, airplane crash, on fire, little man can't get out. And his mother would ask him about that, and he would say, it's me, Mom, I can't get out. The name is James, which it was, but a different James. He said he took off from the water on a boat named the Natoma, that he was shot down by Japanese artillery, and that it was at Iwo Jima. Once his dad was thumbing through a World War II book and he came upon a page of Iwo Jima, and the little boy told him, Daddy, that's where I was shot down. So the parents took all of this very seriously and did the research, and they found out that in fact there was an aircraft carrier in the Pacific Theater. It was the Natoma Bay. That there was in a battle in 1945, there was a pilot that was shot down. It took on Japanese fire. His name was James Houston II, Jr., James Houston Jr., and that he had died. They had a witness who was a gunner on a rear gunner on a plane that was beside Houston's plane when it was hit. Said it took it head on, the shell right into the engine. They could find no debris in the water, so they assumed it went under. So the little boy, when he got old enough to draw, would draw pictures of airplanes, and pictures of an airplane taking a hit into the engine. He'd draw Japanese planes. He'd have, that red sun on it. And he would sign them James III. And they would ask him, well, where does that come from? And he says, well, I'm the third James. James Houston Jr., he's the third James. He had three of these little G.I. Joe dolls. I used to have them as a kid. And he named them Leon, Walter, and Billy. And the parents asked him, well, how did you come up with those names? And he said, well, they were my friends in the war, and I met them in heaven. They came to see me in heaven. So, you got all this evidence here, this indication of reincarnation, and it just brings the skeptics out of the woodwork. No, it can't happen. Reincarnation doesn't happen. So, I don't know. Ian Stevenson stands at the head of the class on reincarnation research. He spent 50 years at the University of Virginia, most of it doing research on reincarnation. He investigated 3,000 claims. A lot more claims than that were brought to his attention, but only the 3,000 he found are ones that had the most likelihood of actually being a reincarnation case. He investigated those. He wrote 14 books and over 300 papers on reincarnation. He found, interesting enough, that it's emotions, memories, and even some physical characteristics are involved in reincarnation. He found that when the prior life had had died, say, of a puncture wound, like a bullet, bullet wound, that their evidence where the bullet entered and or exited the body, you could find a birthmark, evidence that something like that happened. So he was meticulous in the way he went about these cases. If he couldn't find independent verification of something a child said, then he would dismiss that case. And the child, he found that the memories begin to manifest at about age 2, and then at about age 7, they kind of went away, and the child lost interest in it. So anyway, but his work is contested too, because we're just not ready to accept reincarnation here in the West. But there's one case that's never been contested, and that's the case of the Dalai Lama. Current Dalai Lama is the 14th, and he's said to be the incarnate of the 13th. The 13th died in 1933. The current Dalai Lama was born in 1935, but he was 2 years old when they discovered that he was the incarnate. The 13th left some clues behind when he passed. He said that he would be born in the East. He'd be born in the East. And the Dalai Lama was. He was born in the northeast section of Tibet called the Amdo region. They found an interesting thing. The 13th, the practice, Tibetan Buddhist practice, would be when a corpse is lying in state, the head would face to the south. In the case of the 13th, they found his head was facing to the east, so they moved it around, only to come back a couple of days later and find that it was pointed toward the east. They also noticed some strange fungus that was growing on the pillars on the easterly side of the Dalai Lama's palace. And then the regent, the guy that was in charge during this interim period, had a dream. And in this dream, he saw a monastery that had a road leading off to the east. And on this road was a house. The house had a turquoise tile roof. It had a black and brown dog barking in the yard. It had only 3 breeds of dogs in Tibet. There's black, brown, and black and brown. So it had this black and brown dog barking and a little boy in the yard. So all of this prompted a search. And sure enough, they found a home with a turquoise tile roof. The home had a dog. Now understand, the position of Dalai Lama is very invisible, very important. So most parents would want their children, their child, their son, to be identified as the Dalai Lama. Just to make sure that they kept everything clean, they went into this house. They had 4 lamas, but they disguised themselves. They disguised themselves as traders and also as servants. So they go in the house, and the little boy, find a 2-year-old boy, son there, and he identifies, he sees through the disguise. He identifies the 4 as lamas. One of the lamas has rosary beads that belong to the 13th, and the boy said, "Those are mine." And he took them and he started playing with them. So the 4 decided that, there's something here. So they left, and they came back, and they gave him the choice test. And in that test, they take personal objects of the deceased, the prior life, mix them up with like objects of other people, and they see if the candidate can pick out the deceased objects. In this case, they did, let's see, eyeglasses, a bowl, a silver pencil, prayer beads, a walking stick, and a hand drum. Well, the little boy correctly picked out the eyeglasses, the bowl, the silver pencil, and the prayer beads. He had a little problem with the walking stick because actually the choices they gave him, both of them belonged to the 13th. One of them was a duplicate that was rarely used. The other one was the day-to-day use. And he picked out the duplicate. And he held it for a while, and then he put the duplicate down, and he picked out the other walking stick. They had an interesting test with the hand drum, in that they had the 13th hand drum, which was weather-worn from use, and a brand spanking new one side by side, and the boy picked out the old one. So after meditation and consulting, they concluded that this boy, Lamo Dondrup was his name, was in fact the incarnate, and he would be the 14th Dalai Lama. Took him back to Lhasa to install him, but before they did that, it's kind of I gather, a tribal community, and in this particular area there was a warlord who controlled everything, and he would not allow them to take the Dalai Lama out until they came up with a ransom, and the ransom was $400,000. What you think about, it's a lot of money in 1935, or 37, when that would be. So anyway, they came up with the money, took him back. He's highly educated. He would have what we would call here an equivalent of a PhD in philosophy. He mentions an interesting incident where once he was in Lhasa, in the old residence, that he pointed to a box and said, my teeth are in that box. And sure enough, they opened the box, and there were the dentures of the 13th Dalai Lama. So we got all this information here that really talks favorably toward reincarnation. But in the West, and particularly in the Christian institution, we say it can't happen. Which is an interesting position, because by survey, something like 25% of the Christian population say they either believe in reincarnation or they're open to the idea. But they can't be, because you can't do that and be a Christian. In the Christian thought, God created our soul, and God's not in the recycle business. He's in the creation business. And when you follow it through, then you find the whole doctrine of resurrection of the body, of judgment, the so-called last day, even heaven and hell, get put on very shaky ground when you believe in reincarnation. So you go where you want with it, okay? I mean, I'll give you the facts, and from a religious perspective, you do what you want to do. I'm making this video. In a couple of days I'm headed to Tibet. You know, I've made several videos on the rainbow body phenomena, and I'm going up into the highlands to investigate for myself two of the most recent deaths that I know of, rainbow body deaths, 1998 and 2011. So I'm going to the roof of the world to get to the bottom of things. Anyway, come visit me at my website. My book's still available. I'd like to tell you supplies are short, but they're not. It's still available. It's available on Amazon. And I'll talk to you when I get back from Tibet. In the meantime, thanks for watching.